Some aircraft may be seen as just tools, but the A-10 is a legend. Designed around a gun so powerful, it had to be built first. This beast doesn't just fly into danger, it lives there. It wasn't built to win dogfights or look sleek on a recruitment poster. It was built to save lives, to fight with grit, and to come home shot full of holes, but still flying. Its roar and iconic gun strikes fear into enemies, and it delivers hope to troops pinned down on the ground. The A-10's first flight, a gamble. Its pilots, trailblazers. And for 5 decades, it's been the ground troops' guardian angel. Today, it's aging, it's under threat, but it is still flying and still saving lives. And what you're about to learn is the untold story of the most feared aircraft ever to fly alone slow into the jaws of hell. This is the A-10 Thunderbolt. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of This Week in Aviation History, right here on Aero Exploration. Before we get started, if you like what we're doing here, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, and if you want to support us, you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/flyingmidwest. So let's get into the story of the first flight of the A-10 for This Week in Aviation History. We go back to the Vietnam War and how it had exposed a harsh truth in air power. The United States Air Force did not have a dedicated aircraft that could protect the troops on the ground. Their faster-moving jets like the F-4s couldn't really loiter in the area long and would take damage. Helicopters from the Army were vulnerable, and so a new mission was born: close air support. Up close, personal, and dangerous. So out of this battlefield necessity came a radical idea. They wanted to build an aircraft around a gun. And not just any gun. The GAU-8A Avenger, a 30mm rotary cannon that spits out uranium-tipped rounds at nearly 4,000 rounds per minute. So the Air Force launched what was called the AX program in 1966. Fairchild Republic would eventually beat out the Northrop YA-9, but it was a pretty close race. The YA-10A was a strange-looking prototype. It had twin turbofan engines mounted above the fuselage to protect them from ground fire below. It had wings like barn doors for extreme lift and armor plating thick as a safe. But it could also turn low, fly slow, and take hits like nothing before. The engineers at Fairchild were focused on one big important thing: survivability of the aircraft and the pilot, above all else. So with that philosophy came some specifics with the design of the aircraft. So for the safety of the pilot, imagine, if you will, building a cockpit of an aircraft inside of a 1,200-pound titanium tub. This was done to protect the pilot, and it could withstand direct hits from 23mm cannon shells. So if the aircraft is being shot from below by enemy fire, this titanium tub would protect the pilot. We talked a bit about the twin engines, but they were spaced far enough apart to avoid both being taken out with a single strike, thus building some extra redundancies to the aircraft to help the pilot get home safely if they took fire. Now, the flight system itself had triple redundancy built in, including a manual reversion in the event of a full hydraulic failure for the aircraft. The fuel tanks were foam-lined, and they were self-sealing, and they were also placed behind bulkheads to help reduce the risk of fire. Even the wheels were beefed up for operations on unimproved surfaces. This thing could take off from a dirt runway or even a highway, In fact, many military units today will actually practice operations on highways just to show that they can do it and to give their pilots practice in those environments. Overall, this thing wasn't a beauty. It was about brutality and durability. So once we get through all the design phases, let's fast forward to the first flight of the A-10. On May 10, 1972, test pilot Sam Nelson was the man in the seat. At Edwards Air Force Base under the desert sun, the YA-10A lifted off for the first time. The first flight of the aircraft was cautious. This was a brand new kind of aircraft, an armored flying gun. During this flight, Nelson would fly for 81 minutes, putting the controls of the aircraft through its paces. It wasn't fast, and it wasn't graceful, but the aircraft worked. As the prototype proved itself, the A-10 underwent further testing. Engineers pushed it to take off from these dirt fields, fire the GAU-8, and survive combat damage. The cannon alone had to be mounted off-center to avoid destabilizing the aircraft. So after rigorous testing of the A-10, by 1977, the first aircraft were delivered to Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, and the Warthog was ready to go to war. So let's talk about the mission of the A-10. From the very outset, the A-10 had one job, and that was to protect and support the troops on the ground. With a top speed of just over 400 knots and a combat radius of nearly 300 miles, the A-10 wasn't made for speed, but it was made to get down into the weeds and get down and dirty and assist the troops on the ground. So pilots trained to fly low, slow, and steady, identifying enemy armor and infantry and unleashing a barrage of fire. Now, the gun alone could tear through tanks. Each round was the size of a beer bottle, and it could penetrate several inches of armor. This cannon is so powerful, fire briefly actually decelerates the aircraft. In addition to the impressive gun of the A-10, it can also carry 16,000 pounds of additional ordnance, from bombs, rockets, cluster munitions, and missiles. Where the A-10 would really prove itself was during the first Gulf War. During that campaign, the A-10 flew more than 8,000 sorties. It would destroy 900 Iraqi tanks, 2,000 vehicles, and more than 1,200 artillery pieces. The kill ratio of this aircraft was staggering, and the troops on the ground knew it. Ground troops would call these aircraft anything from the Angel of Death to the BRRRT machine. The name BRRRT machine was a nod to the distinctive noise of that iconic gun. One Marine in Fallujah had said, "The Warthog showed up and suddenly it felt like we had a fighting chance." There are also well-documented stories of the A-10 returning from battle with significant damage, but still making it home after the fight. A testament to the design that was originally put forth by Fairchild. In fact, one story that demonstrates this is that of Air Force pilot Kim Campbell, flying in Iraq in 2003. Her A-10 was hit by enemy fire, her hydraulic systems were knocked out, and she flew the aircraft back manually. This is something that other fighter jets couldn't have done. She landed safely despite the aircraft being heavily damaged. Now, despite its successes, the Air Force has actually tried to retire the A-10 multiple times. The argument? It's old, it's expensive to maintain, and it's vulnerable in a high-threat environment. But the counter-argument is always better. The A-10 just works. Congress has repeatedly blocked its retirement. Veteran pilots, ground commanders, defense analysts, and the troops on the ground continue to support this aircraft. Now, interestingly enough, when the F-35 was positioned as the A-10's replacement, a shootout-style fly-off was suggested. But the A-10 performed close air support better in almost every single trial. Simpler, cheaper, and purpose-built, it simply outclassed this more advanced jet in its niche. Even now, with unmanned systems, stealth jets dominating the headlines, the A-10 is still flying missions. So though the A-10 is getting older, it has had some upgrades to keep it modern. Things like a glass cockpit, precision engagement upgrades for their targeting pods, helmet-mounted systems for faster target acquisition, and wing replacements and digital flight systems. But none of these things change what's truly in the DNA of the A-10. It is a close-in killer, built to take a beating and come back for more. So as we talk today in 2025, the Air Force has begun to retire some A-10s, targeting a full phase-out by the year 2029. But as we've seen before, those plans can change, especially when the boots on the ground keep asking for their guardian angel. So whether the A-10 finally leaves for good or lives on, its legacy is still somewhat secure. So as I get ready to wrap up this episode, I just want to give a little anecdote that for me, this was a fun episode to put together because the A-10 is personally my favorite aircraft in the Air Force inventory. We had a number of these at the base I was stationed at, and it was always fun to watch them fly, check out their maneuvers, and the iconic sound of that gun is just something to behold. So if you're a fan of the A-10 as well, be sure to leave me a comment down below and tell me your favorite part of this aircraft. Well, thanks for joining me in this installment of This Week in Aviation History, right here on Aero Exploration. If you enjoy these videos, be sure to like, subscribe, and follow the channel for more content and great stories just like this one. And don't forget, if you want to support the channel, you can check us out on Patreon, which is patreon.com/Flying Midwest. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.